Okay, so we're going to move on to the 2-2 notes today. This is 2-2 standard form of a quadratic function. So learning target, the goal for this section is that I can write and graph quadratic functions in standard form. All right, so I can write and graph quadratic functions in standard form. Standard form, we actually did it back when we did 2-1 as well. We talked about it. But once again, it's ax squared plus bx plus c. And sometimes they talk about this, but they don't always put it on here. But they make the condition that a can't be 0. And the only reason they write that on there is because if a was 0, then that term would drop out, and you would then just have a linear function. So that's why they say a's got to actually be something, because the x squared is what makes it a quadratic. Okay, so the part right here talks about how we, where this formula comes from to find the vertex. So if we read example 1, it says, find the vertex of a quadratic function in standard form. So when it's in standard form, there's no h and k value here. So it's not like all of last section where, let me just show you real quick. Let me grab the one that's actually filled out. If you look at your, there we go. If you look at your vertex form, the h and the k are just clearly right there. So you can look at this equation and just know where the vertex is. Whereas when it's in standard form, there's no h or k values in there. So what do? Well, the x coordinate of the vertex, there's actually just a formula for it. So I'm just going to give you the formula here. I'm not going to actually run through where it comes from or anything, because you don't really need that. But the formula is just h equals negative b over 2a. And this is a formula that you're going to want to remember. You're going to use it on quizzes, tests, etc. And you're definitely going to see it quite a bit. So what does this mean? Well, if we take the b and the a values and we substitute them into here, this formula gives us the coordinate for the h value. All right, so let's just do a problem so you can see what I'm talking about. So if the question is, what's the vertex of this function, but it's given you in standard form like this, we need to use this formula because there's no other way to just see the vertex from looking at it. So if we do that, h equals, so it's negative b. Now, if you notice, this b is already negative. So you're going to have a negative 6, which, if you're writing that out, is like negative 6, over 2a, and our a value in this case is just 1. So it'd be 2 times 1. Now you want to simplify that out. That's going to be a positive 6 over 2, which 6 divided by 2 is just 3. So now as you're figuring out this problem, you're saying, what is the vertex? We know the h coordinate now. Now we haven't figured out the k yet, but we know what the h is. So the next step is, how do you figure out the k? The k value is whatever you get out of this if you put h in. Because, h is the input. Anytime you have a coordinate point, this is the input and that's the output. So if I input 3 into this function, I'm going to get out the k value. So I'm going to say k is just going to be, if I put a 3 into here, so that's going to be 3 squared minus 6 times 3 plus 10. And you can use a calculator here if you need to. But let's go ahead and just figure it out. So that's going to be 3 squared is 9 minus 18 plus 10. So 9 minus 18 is a negative 9 plus 10 is going to just be 1. So I get the k is 1. And therefore, there's my vertex. All right. So I can find the vertex using these formulas. Like a lot of things in this class, if you haven't got to this yet, you can check so many things by graphing. If you graph this, guess what? You can see if this coordinate is correct or not. So if I wanted to go ahead and go to my y equals, or if you're using decimals, same deal. If you put it in here, x squared minus 6x plus 10. And if we just press graph, we should just be able to see if our answer makes sense. So first thing, the vertex is at 3, 1, right? 3 up 1. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I could also jump to my table if I want to, just to make sure that it looks good. And you can see that it does. Like 3, 1 is this point, and you can see the point's symmetric going each way. So we're good. We've checked it. We know everything's fine. All right, so there's another problem right here. See if you can work it out. So take a second and see if you can find the vertex of this. So, I'd recommend pausing it so you can actually do it. Or if that's too much for you, just wait for me to do it. Okay, so I've worked it out here. So you can check and see if you did well. H coordinate, you should end up getting 4. So, go back, look at your numbers here, see if you got what I did, check if it worked out. Then I took that 4 and I substituted it in for my x's. That's what I did right here. Worked it all through and ended up simplifying to negative 11. So now I've got my h, I got my k, and I just wrote my coordinate point. Always h comma k. And that's it. So now if we jump ahead to the next piece, so this is all about finding a vertex. The next piece is just going to kind of build off this to make a graph by hand. So if we're going to make a graph, the two real steps here are when it says, how can you use key features to make this graph? One of the key features is very clearly going to be the vertex. So let's just go ahead and start with that. So we're going to do exactly what we just did a second ago. We're going to say h equals negative b, so that's a negative 4 over 2 times 1. Okay, what's that? So positive 4 over 2, which is just 2. All right, so my vertex is going to be at the coordinate 2 comma something. And that something we get by finding our k. So put 2 in for our x's. So 2 squared minus 4 times 2 plus 8. All right, so what is that? 2 squared is 4. It'll be a negative 8, and that'll be a plus 8. So that's easy math there. If you minus 8 and you plus 8, you're going to be just left with the 4. Okay, so my vertex coordinates are h was 2, k was 4. Awesome. So if I was making this graph, that's what the problem wants me to do, I'm going to plot that vertex. So 2, 4, I know 100% that's the vertex of this. Now I also know this graph opens up because the a value is positive, but I need another point. So how do I know another point? Well, there's actually a really easy way. The y-intercept, when a graph is in standard form, the y-intercept, if you remember, is when x is 0. It's like, where it crosses the y-axis. So if you put 0 in here and here, these two terms just drop out, and you're always just left with the c value. So the takeaway here is whatever this c value is just the y-intercept. So we would know from looking at this that our intercept is at 0, 8. And that's going to hold true for every one of these problems. So if I plot 0, 8, I've got points here where I can now get my graph together. And then another one, if you just want a tip as far as how to make your graph just look better, if you use your little axis symmetry here, because we know this graph's symmetric about that point, then we could plot the point that's opposite of it right here at 4, 8. And that just lets us get the nice U shape. We can make sure our graph looks good, that it's accurate. But that's an easy way to get points on the graph. We can find the vertex using our formula. We know the c value is the y-intercept, and then we can reflect the c value over the axis of symmetry to get a third point. So it just makes a nice clean graph there. Pretty straightforward. So if you look here, here's a similar one. Again, I'd recommend pausing it and actually trying to do the problem, and then you can check it against mine here. All right, so I've gone ahead and did the work. My vertex, h formula, substituted my b and my a in, and it came out to be 3. I then took my 3, substituted it into the function itself, and simplified it out to be negative 10. So now I know my vertex, 3, negative 10. Plotted it. The y-intercept, really easy. It's just the c value. So the y-intercept, we know this graph crosses at negative 1. So boom, 0, negative 1. And then if you notice here, I've taken my axis of symmetry, and I just reflect this point over, instead of it's going to be at 6, negative 1 now. And then it lets me draw a nice smooth graph onto here. And there we go. And that's really it. So you're going to see these skills today on the assignment. Another just quick thing is I feel like some of you guys get frustrated because the assignment isn't just these exact problems. It's not going to just be these exact problems. It's anything where you're using these skills. And so you got to use some of the tools there. If you're looking at something and you don't know where to go with it, use some of the hints, use some of the examples, take a little screenshot of the picture and say, hey, can you help me explain what to do this, and send me an email? I can help you with that stuff. So if you run into questions, on the OTI that you aren't totally sure on, ask for help or use the help tools on there. So take advantage of that stuff and you can be pretty successful, I think.